I would like to call to order the meeting of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee. And I'd like to have you call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Hanneman.
Here.
Member Barrett.
Here.
Member Cardinal.
Here.
Member Justice.
Here.
Member Kennedy.
Here.
Member Smith.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment that we'd like to hear?
So they'll take, I think there's some people here that are here to comment on projects during the allocation plan.
Got it.
So they will take public comment during that time.
All right, so thank you very much, Lee. All right, then, for possible action to elect, I'd like to, the approval of the minutes of November 6th. I'll take a motion on that to approve or not to approve or make any corrections.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes have been approved. Before we go into the election of a RAC chair and vice chair for 2018, may I introduce Mike Smith? Have you been introduced yet before? I wasn't here for the November meeting.
No, this is my first meeting.
Okay, so it's your first meeting. So Mike, you want to tell us about yourself for a moment?
Okay, well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm certainly glad to be part of the RAC committee, representing the citizens at large, and obviously it will be my primary responsibility to be your voice, to advocate for the citizens as part of this committee. I'm looking forward to working with my esteemed colleagues who sit here to my left, and certainly hope that we can have a great meetings from here on out and be able to discuss the business here of Carson City, and for now and for the future. So I'm glad to be part of the organization. I look forward to hearing from the citizens, public comments, and also from my constituency as well. So thank you.
Can you give us a bit of background?
My background, I'm a retired high school principal. I moved here from the south of Mississippi. I've only been here now going on 8 months. I also ran for several offices in my hometown in DeSoto County, Mississippi. I'm an Ole Miss graduate for all the Rebel fans out there, hotty toddy. And like I said, I've been here for 8 months. I served on the DeSoto County Economic Council back in my hometown, in which we made major decisions affecting the county and the state of Mississippi, as well as the municipalities that I reside in. I also ran for state senator and also ran for the city. We had board of aldermen, unlike here in Carson, you have board of supervisors. So I bring a wealth of experience and background in both the private and public sector. Also had a 501c3 organization back here. And I'm here this afternoon, if on a personal privilege and a personal note, I'm here and I'm proud to introduce my, I don't say soulmate, but my twin flame who's sitting right there in the front, my fiancee, Margaret Broyles. And so I'm looking forward to being here, and I love Carson City. When I first moved here, I embraced the city quite well. I'm looking forward to being part of Carson City and to being part of the community. So I think that's about enough.
Yes, I think so. You definitely can tell you were a politician or are a politician or will be a politician or whatever. So that's why I had to ask what you were, because
Right.
your initial introduction, you sounded like a politician. So all right, we now know where we stand. Okay, so without further ado, we are on 4A for possible action to elect a RAC chair and vice chair for 2018. Lee, you want to say something about this?
No, I would just say that per the Board of Supervisors policies and procedures, they have limitations on chairpersons. So, however, there's nobody on the RAC committee now that would violate that. So I think at this point, now that Ronnie's had a year off the chair, it would not be in violation of the policies if she were elected the chair. That's not an endorsement by any means, but that's just so you know. So you have the ability to elect anybody to the chair and vice chair.
Okay, so I'll entertain nominations, please.
I nominate Court Cardinal for chair.
Second.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Hearing none, shall we vote on the chair? Okay. All those in favor of Court Cardinal as the chair for 2018, please state so. Well, Court, you are the chair, so I guess you can take over now and get the vice chair.
Thanks, Ronnie. I'd like to nominate Jason as vice chair.
Second. Continue, it's yours.
All in favor?
Better ask for other nominations.
No, other nomination, sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Jason, vice chair. Well, I guess I have the baton now. So, next topic up for discussion is to provide a presentation regarding the 90% design of the downtown Curry Streetscape Improvement Project.
Dan Stuckey from the engineering department is here to give a presentation to you and update, so I'll turn it over to Dan at this time.
Good evening, Dan Stuckey, city engineer for the record. I'm joined here by Mike Bennett. He's the director of engineering over at Loomis and Associates, and Loomis is the lead designer on this project. They also did the downtown project, so he's very familiar with the project as a whole. So I'll just get right into it, Lee, if you don't mind. Go to the next slide. So kind of just a little background. I think last time I was here was in November, and at that point, we had RAC provided the $550,000 for the cross streets, the funding there, to help with the beautification of those cross streets. And so at that point, the design team was already at the 60% level with Curry, but the cross streets had not started design at that point. So basically since November of last year, the design team has moved forward the Curry Street design from the 60 to 90% and basically taken the cross street design from 0 to 90%. So that's where we are today. They just recently finished up the 90% design, and so I'm just going to give a brief update today and then answer any questions that you may have. Here's a kind of an illustrative plan of some of the improvements and what they'll look like. I've highlighted a couple items to talk about. Just, similar to Carson Street, you're going to have, if you look up at the intersection of Curry and Musser, you can see, the big bulb areas where you have the pavers and the sidewalks and the landscaping. So very similar to the design approach that you saw in Carson. A lot of those materials will be the same, which later on in this presentation, I have a slide with the furnishings that we'll be using, same as Carson Street. And I guess just to give you an idea on the project limits, so Curry Street, the improvements will be from Musser to Robinson, and then the cross streets will be the 5 cross streets in between, so Musser, Proctor, Telegraph, Spear, and Robinson. And also, if you go to the next slide, Lee, the alleyway there, which you can see between Telegraph and Spear, we're also proposing some improvements there. On here, I just wanted to point out some of the, I think, kind of cool features that we have in the 90% design are, if you look at Telegraph Square, large amount of pavers we're going to be utilizing there, and also kind of upgrading the planter areas, the 4 planter areas that are in the that are currently there. We're going to be upgrading the facade of those. And again, lots of landscaping everywhere. With the cross streets, you can see there, the alleyway. We're going to be, I don't know if you guys have walked down that alleyway, but the surface material, the pavers that they have there are pretty deteriorated. So we're looking at improving those and basically putting pavers down across that whole stretch up until about the Cactus Jack's properties. The pavers there are actually in really good shape, so it'll tie in nicely. If you go to the next slide, Lee. Just to kind of give you a feel for the alley improvements, the existing arch that's there is a wooden arch that's pretty worn. It's not shown in this picture, but the middle picture there is essentially what we're looking at replacing it with, so more of like a steel decorative arch. This one attaches to the building. The one that we're proposing will not attach to the building. It'll be freestanding, somewhat similar to the picture in the upper right. And then another thing that we're proposing with this is some string lighting along the alleyway. So I'm currently working on coordinating that with the property owners there. So that kind of gives you a feel what we're doing there. Lee, if you don't mind going to the next one. Again, here's the furnishings, the street lights, very similar to Carson. One thing I forgot to point out at the beginning is I've been showing a lot of the beautification, but with this, there's a really large utility infrastructure upgrades associated with this project. So we're going to be, as you can imagine, some of the oldest utilities in the city are right down in the heart of downtown. Some of them, over 50, 60 years old. So we're going to be looking at replacing the sewer lines, stormwater, water lines that are in that area. So a significant part of this project is utility improvements. Lee, if you don't mind going to the next. Yeah, so here the next 4 slides, we don't have to go into a lot of detail, but just kind of give you a feeling for the trees that we'll be using on this project. And again, a lot of them are being used at the downtown project. Here's some of the shrubs. And then on the next couple, some of the flowers, and then on the last slide, some of the grasses that we'll be incorporating in the landscaping. Again, a lot of them, it'll look very similar to Carson. And that really concludes my presentation. I think from, schedule moving forward, we're at the 90% design right now. We're advancing to final, which is going to happen, I believe, in about mid-March. First week or second week in March is when that'll be due. And then we're looking to start construction towards the end of April for that. And we're looking at about a 4-month construction at the moment. We're still working out with the contractor some of the construction phasing and sequencing. So schedule is still yet to be determined on how best to do those improvements, but we're working on that right now. So with that, open it up to questions that you may have.
I have a question. You were talking about all the things that you're going to put on the sidewalks, the benches, et cetera, like Carson Street. Now, Carson Street was twice as wide as Curry Street, and of course the side streets are very narrow. Are you widening the sidewalks? What are you doing there to make it to be able to accommodate all of that?
Yeah, so Mike can speak into it. I'll start in, and then Mike, please add. But the sidewalks in some places are getting wider to accommodate, more room for walkability and all that. In some instances, they're basically staying the same. But yeah, where we're putting benches, we're very, we're thinking down the road as far as, making sure there's adequate room there to not just put a bench in the middle of the walk or, a big obstruction or anything. So we're trying to accommodate and have that kind of walkability that you see on downtown. But you're right. I mean, with Curry, you're not going to see the magnitude of, width in the sidewalks as Carson, but there's still a lot of areas that are, we're able to accommodate those furnishings.
Yeah, Dan said it well. Just for a point of reference, the block between Telegraph and Spear Street, that's a wider sidewalk area. That's staying approximately the same width as it is today, and the rest of the blocks will match it. So you have narrow blocks or narrow sidewalks down as you get south of Telegraph, and actually even the sidewalk to the north of Spear Street. So those will all be widened to match roughly the same width as is today. So there'll be room for the furnishings, I guess is the point. The west side of the road, those are pretty narrow today. They'll stay narrow. They'll stay the same width, I should say. They're certainly narrow enough for sidewalks. But there's not a lot of furnishings that'll go in there. Maybe some bike racks and whatnot.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out how you're going to do all that and keep your parking, on both sides of the street as well. So I couldn't quite figure that out.
Any other comments?
Dan, last time you mentioned that the gas lights were all going to be replaced because they're low and old or something. What's going to become of those old units? Are they going to be, are they of historic character that you're
Yeah,
going to
actually I haven't thought about that yet, but that's actually, thanks for that reminder. Yeah, I'm not sure, I don't know if Q&D we haven't really talked about it at this point. I mean, those are a lot of the details we're going to be working out here in this final stage of design is, what's going to happen to those things. But yeah, probably some of them are pretty historical, I would imagine, have been around for a while. So, but I don't have an answer for you at the moment.
Well, to add to that, I can tell you there are some people who would like to buy it, so
Yeah.
it would be a revenue source.
Yeah, exactly. I like it.
Any other comments?
Just one. So, Dan, you mentioned construction would start at the end of April?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what kind of timetable are we looking at to have the construction completed? And then my part B to that same question, are we looking at to have disruption of parking and vehicles coming through? What would be some alternate plans for the public in order to who is driving downtown or coming there for activities or the restaurants? So how will that affect the parking and driving?
Yeah, I know, it's a good question. So as far as the timeline, yeah, we're looking at late April, early May construction, and then, end of July into August a little bit is what we're thinking as far as timeline is when it would end. As far as disruptions, I mean, that's the beauty of the process that we're doing right now. It's called a CMAR process, and essentially you hire the contractors with you during the design stage, and with Q&D, who's the contractor, they worked on downtown Carson Street through construction, so they're very familiar with, things that worked well for the construction of those improvements and things that maybe didn't, that they need to improve as far as, allowing, good access to the businesses. It is insane that it is construction, so there's going to be interruptions to businesses. I mean, that's just the nature of construction. But I'm confident that Q&D and the design team and us we can all figure out ways to kind of minimize that and plan around that. And like I said, that's kind of where we're at now, is starting to look at those details of how we're going to face construction and really try to minimize that impact.
Which leads right into my question, which I assume I already know the answer to, and that's you're already talking with businesses and finding out, because you did that same thing on Carson.
Yeah, so I meant to mention that. Actually, last week we met with the Downtown Business Association. We did a presentation similar to what we're doing now, gathered a lot of feedback from them on that. We also, we talked more design specifics at that meeting. We didn't really necessarily get into construction details, but we will, I believe March 22nd is the date. We'll be sending out advertisements for that, and that'll be kind of our day where we're going to bring whoever wants to come in. We'll have the contractor there with us. We'll do it in the evening and be able to speak to construction specifics at that meeting. So we are, to answer your question, yes, we are coordinating with them. The other thing I wanted to mention too is we're trying to roll out a lot of our updates through the Carson Proud website. Rachel Schneider, who I think some of you are familiar with her, she's an information technology officer, manager. She's really done a great job with that website. She just last week posted updates to the Curry project. And so we'll be pushing out updates probably every couple of weeks on kind of the status of design. And then once we get more into construction details, we'll push out that. And then another cool thing with that website is when construction starts, they'll do, I think they called it the cone zone map last year, or when they did downtown Carson, we'll be implementing something similar where it shows, hey, this week, Telegraph's going to be closed, or next week we're looking at, closing Curry from this block to this block, that kind of information, so businesses can plan accordingly and kind of keep that dialogue. You can also, write emails into the website that get directed to myself or other people of the design team, and we can respond to those. So it's a really good way to get information out on the project.
Well, you are to be congratulated for what you did last time. I don't think there was that much disruption, and this is a much, much smaller project, so it'll work out, I'm sure.
Okay, any public comment? All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 4C, for possible action to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the expenditure of $30,000 from the fiscal year 2018 Redevelopment Revolving Fund for design and construction of downtown gateway signage in conjunction with the South Carson City Gateway Project. Lee?
Good evening. Again, for the record, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. So on this, we're shifting a little bit on projects from the downtown area to the South Carson Street projects, which includes pretty much all of South Carson Street from 5th Street south all the way down to the freeway. So, and this has to do with funding and design of that. So Dan's going to stick around for this one in case there's any questions on this design. So this item specifically is to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the expenditure of $30,000 from this year's fiscal budget redevelopment revolving fund for design and construction of downtown gateway signage in conjunction with the South Carson Street Carson Gateway project. So a little bit of background on this. Again, this is a recommendation to the board to actually authorize the expenditure of this $30,000, which would go towards design and construction of signage with the South Carson Street project. This committee has received an update previously on the South Carson Street project and the alternatives that were put out there and ultimately selected, and now that project is actually under design. There's a federal transportation grant that's been submitted on behalf of the city so that it's going back. I think the funded plan is to reconstruct South Carson Street, redo it from Fairview south to the freeway. And that's what's in the budget. That's using the NDOT money that's coming to the city to do it. Longer term plans are to make that connection between the downtown and Fairview through other grants and sales tax monies. But the city has submitted a grant and is hoping to be able to design and construct that portion all in one construction project to bring it up to the downtown area. The Citizens Committee and the Redevelopment Authority in last year's budgeting process recommended to allocate some funds to downtown signage to provide a gateway. So now that this project's under design, we are suggesting that you authorize the expenditure of $30,000. We estimate up to maybe as much as $10,000 of which would go towards the design of gateway signage on that portion of the construction project. We think it's important to incorporate that design now as they're looking at how they're going to restripe the lanes, identifying areas for landscaping, because we need to identify a spot for some gateway signage. So that is the purpose of this allocation. I think this may be the item for that we have somebody in the audience. You've had a handout about signage. So it's this, I don't know that it's this type of thing. So as you can see with this, you've seen this before too, suggestion of doing some grand gateway signage to the downtown. The $30,000 certainly does not cover this construction. In fact, I think there's some cost estimates with that Ms. Mack could talk to. But I think the purpose of this is to get some, and I think consistent with RAC's direction, is not a grand entrance sign, but to get some signage, some sort of notification that you're here to go this way to downtown Carson City. It's probably not the "you are here" sign. It's more of the gateway, continue down South Carson Street to the downtown. But anyway, so I'll conclude with that. That's the purpose of this funding. I'll have Dan to stick around in case there's any questions on the design of this, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lee. Questions from the committee?
No, the only thing that I would like to add is that we have already allocated the $30,000 for this in last year's budget for the 2018 budget. So why are we revisiting this?
Sorry, I meant to be more specific of that. So there's allocating it in the budget, and then there's authorizing the expenditure, and those are two different things. So it actually takes a resolution, a specific action to authorize the expenditure. For some things, we've lumped these together with the budget, like authorizing the expenditure of the facade improvement fund. So in fact, if it shows up on there. The left-hand column is the current fiscal year budget on the screen up there, and the bold italicized units are the ones that have been authorized for expenditure. The other ones are pools of money that are there, but we've promised to bring it back to you through the process when a specific project for expenditure comes in, so that you get a chance to vet the actual project and authorize the expenditure. So this item and then the next item is the same thing. It's under the program. The money's been allocated, but you have to also make a recommendation and the redevelopment authority approve the actual expenditure.
Thanks for the clarification.
And a question on this, just on the numbers here. I mean, the original one was talking about a $30,000 budget. The handout that we've just received says the design fees in the $60,000 to $80,000 range. Is that?
So this was handed out. I'm sorry. This was handed out by somebody, a member of the public that's going to speak to this. This is not from staff. So again, the opportunity for this to use this $30,000 is to get some sort of gateway entry directional signage incorporated into the design. The construction on South Carson Street very likely would be that stretch somewhere between the Carson Mall and the downtown, to look at the design and in conjunction with other landscaping, the things that they're looking at. Where does the sign go? What does it look like? And hopefully to be able to place it all in one shot.
Thanks, Jason. I think some of us may have questions with regards to the handout, so at this time I'd like to open up for public comment.
Good evening. Can you hear me? I am Doreen Mack. I'm owner of Lofty Expressions Interiors, and I am president of the Downtown 2020 Group. We were heavily involved in the first phase of this project, from going from the 4 lanes to the 2 lanes and into the design process. I've made copies of the arch design that we have done for the entrance at 5th Street and the other one for Williams Street, coming in from Williams Street to Carson Street. The contracts are attached for the structural engineer and for Q&D. Q&D quoted this back in 2016. We got the engineer, I believe, in September of last year. The arch is distinctive and embellishes the historic downtown entrances. We want to support the businesses coming in to make Carson City a vital downtown and make it worth the investment of the owners and businesses. Signage is crucial for every business to succeed, especially on Curry Street, because their only link to them is off of Main Street, so we need to have signage throughout town. The cupolas that you will notice on this incorporates a lot of things into this arch. In the center of it, we have the date when downtown was established. We have the cupolas, which represent the Capitol building. The sandstone pillars represent the roundhouse that was taken down. And this also incorporates the street light, the one on 5th Street. The other one, that's what we need the structural engineer to go over all this, is the one on William Street, and that one's still up in the air of placement. This gives a distinction for the historic downtown area. And even people, and I've talked to the businesses that have said, people come in and say, where is the historic downtown? Well, we know where it is, and we worked very hard to create this. But it is important that we do have a symbol up there that you have entered into this area. The cupolas could be made as designated historic markers around town for buildings, and like the Ferris building, for instance, or restaurants, or that are outside of that district, that would show that, that brings in that whole theme from the downtown area throughout our town. So that would be a really nice gesture if we could get that okayed. I am asking for some funding for this project, and this is going to be a lot of money. The structural engineer is between $60,000 to $80,000. Q&D in 2016 quoted this, I think, at $315,000. And there's always those things that are unseen that we don't know about until you get into the project. So we know it's going to be a lot. So we need to start somewhere. So for future reference, if the money's not here now, down the road, if we could get money allocated to start this process, that's what I am asking for. The businesses themselves have invested a lot of money in the downtown core, as well as the property owners. So it's really important that we got this ball rolling, that we keep it going and keep the support for them. So that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm asking for, and I thank you for listening to me, and hopefully we'll be back here and work on some more things. So is there any questions that I can answer for you?
First of all, thank you for bringing that to us tonight. I do have a couple questions. One, we only received one picture of the 5th Street arch. Is the 5th Street and the Williams, are they going to look similar or the same?
They're going to look very similar, but because the road spans down at the William Street entrance is a lot wider, you still are 4 lanes as you come in off of that intersection. So that's why the structural engineer is very important. So no, we do not have a picture of that, but the idea is that they will look very similar, very much the same. So it's just how in placement, and do we do it on the corner, or do we come back to the middle of the street because of all the signage that's going on that corner anyway? So, but it's in that area, and it's pretty much the same design.
Okay, thank you. Also, do you have a time frame on how long the project would take to complete, and do you have a time frame on when you would like to start?
Oh, I'd love to start as soon as we could, but a time frame for it, no, because we've got to raise the money, and that's where we're at with this. And I've got commitments, or I had them from both of these people, and so hopefully, as soon as we can get the money for it, we can start the process. But it's going to take a while, I would guess. So I don't have any idea though as far as the time frame of it.
Okay, thank you. John, it looks like you want to talk.
Want to ask questions?
Hi, John.
Hi. You said you have commitment from both of these people. What people?
Q&D and the proposals that I submitted to you. Q&D is the contractor, and Brett McElney is the structural engineer. And he, we raised the money, he's in on it, so he's very happy he's excited about the whole notion.
And what method, besides coming to us for this, which would apparently cost $400,000, just as a guesstimate at this point?
Oh, yeah.
How is that money to be raised?
Well, I will be doing a presentation at the Board of Supervisors meeting. Is that in March, Lee? That one, there's a Board of Supervisors coming up that I will talk to them about this. I did do a grant, haven't heard anything, so I'm working on those processes too, of going out and seeing if we can get grants for this. But all of it takes time, so this is the one step.
How much was the grant that you're requesting?
A lot. And I went to Warren Buffett for this. It's like he has a bank on the corner on William Street there, so this would behoove him to do this. I am figuring, and this is allowing for costs that we don't know, it's going to be up there. I can see it going into, with both arches, and the other one, we don't even have the numbers in on that, really. We just got the drawing of, the idea of where we want to go with it. So I could see it being up close to almost $1 million. So that's what I'm thinking, is that, by the time you get through and get into those areas that you don't know about, and power and that's moved, and this thing's drilled down, and you got both of them, and you got the large spans that you're working on, and it's going to be quite a bit of money. But I don't have those numbers in yet. That's why it's so important that we get the engineer on board. And we got to get him paid and get this thing started.
Regarding William Street, as you know, I'm sure, the William Street project will come at some point after the South Carson Street project. Mm-hmm. And that's an extended period of time, but as I understand it, we're thinking of changing the configurations of that street. So would you be interested in staging this to the point where you do the downtown first and wait for the William? How does it,
Sure.
how do you envision that?
I am open to any kind of suggestions, but it's getting started, so it's the one step to starting this process. So starting the one on Fifth Street, I think, is a great idea. Having signage along the way, as Lee said, as an introduction to coming into the downtown area, and then having the historic sign where the historic district starts. I think that one's the most important one. And then when that's there, we got something visual to look at, then working on the other one as it comes ready to do so.
Just so I understand, your presentation is that you're going to try and raise some of the money or all the money outside of government, or get some of the money from government and some of the money, obviously you want this money from government.
Right, I am trying to get money from government to help support this, yes.
All the way through, or just at this starting point?
Well, I'll see, at least at the start, and I'll do what I can on the outside to bring in any kind of grant money that I can and see what happens. But to start with, it's like if we can get the engineer on board now, then we can start this process and see where we're at. But until we have him, I don't have any idea for numbers, so.
I understand. Thank you.
I have a question. Doreen, you only have basically one quote and one rendering. Is that on purpose, or why do we not have a couple of more that maybe not $1 million project when we have roads and so many other things to do in this community?
Well, and again, Ronnie, I'm not sure that that's how much it would be. I don't have any idea. We had like the $315,000, again, that was 2016. And the longer we put this off, the more it's going to go up. We did do other renderings in our group, and I presented renderings, or I think pictures. We did a presentation at the, was it Board of Supervisors? It was a while back, but I had done those, and at the Arts and Cultural Commission. But it came down to this one because of the simplicity of it, and we met the height requirements for the parade. That was a big issue. We took everything historical that we could think to put into this, and the arch itself is metal, is iron. So, no, it would be... Let me pull this out. And it also includes the stoplights. So that in itself is a big part of this cost because of the electric that has to be put through and the stoplights put in. And that, again, depending on what we do with the one on William Street, that could fluctuate the cost of it also. So, and if there's changes being made to that down there, then that would be the time to really address what we do with this.
I have an additional question. Have you raised any funds yet for this?
None.
So this process started back in October of 2000, or didn't start, but you got your quote in October of 2016. Here we are in spring of, or winter, almost spring of 2018. So it's obviously been on radar for a long time, but no funds have been raised yet, so this is your initial step.
No, because Q&D did not have a structural engineer, and I couldn't get anybody to commit to it until I met Brett. And he said at our meeting that we had in September that he would commit to this if we could raise the money.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the?
Your statement earlier triggered something. What about the parade? How high is this, and does it meet those requirements?
I think it had to be like 13 or 14 feet high. Lee, do you know?
I don't know.
There was a requirement for height, and Sam's not here.
It's probably, but yeah, whatever it'd be the requirements for the street lights, it'd be whatever height they need to be
Yeah.
minimum height.
Yeah. So it, but it did meet the height. We made sure that it met the height requirements for the parade, and we were good there. It actually, you know, when it comes down to details, like do we light up the cupolas on the center? Do we have the flags on the top there? So, you know, and it says Nevada State Capitol. It could also say right underneath where the date is for the city. It could also say Downtown Historic District. There's lots of play here still. So once we get the funds for this and we get everything put together, you know, we do have things that we can discuss. But certainly this will set the template for the one that will be on William Street.
Can I go back to the original, is that we already approved a $30,000 expenditure to get this started. So we now have the documents, and I guess where do we go from here?
Let me ask about that, Ronnie, or ask Lee, was this 30,000 for this, or was this for signage generally?
Yeah, so a little bit, now that I understand, again, this was late information, and so I'm seeing this too now. Wasn't sure how this fit in with this signage versus future signage. This may be more appropriately discussed now that I've heard the presentation and had time to look at this with the item 4E, that is the future allocation plan, where you actually have the kind of money possibly, at least possibly available to help fund something like this versus the $30,000. And I haven't had a chance to talk with Doreen about this specifically, but I think even what you said is part of that the smaller sign that still guides people to the downtown is something that I think is a separate project and still a valid project that we want to do. And I think this may be something we add to the list for consideration under 4E to look at possible, along with all the other things, to look at its ranking for future funding.
Okay, thanks. Lee, do we need a motion to move that there, or can we just, okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. Oh, tonight? So I can stay here then? Okay. All righty.
You're just moving down the list a little bit, so.
Okay. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you, Doreen. Well, that takes us to agenda 4D. No?
See if there's any other public comment, and then it's a item that requires action. Yeah, there's a.
Okay, so any other public comment? Okay, actionable items, so does someone want to make a motion to?
Well, I have a question now because I'm confused. I thought this was part of it, which it obviously is not right now. So we have the $30,000 there. We do not have a presentation or any kind of idea at all on what we're really talking about for the downtown entry signs. So it's really hard to give money for something you have no visual or you don't really know what's going on. So sorry to put that in there, but I can't vote on something that I don't know what I'm voting on.
The money's to do the design so you can, to review what the sign is. So I think that there's going to be a process in the design. They haven't even started the design work on this portion. I can't say they haven't started the design, but it hasn't got to the point of being something that's ready to show, to bring back to rack, but the design's going to come back. So you need to, either you authorize the expenditure to include the sign in the design, and then we'll bring back the design before they spend the money on the sign, and we'll get input on it, or we don't do it as part of this project.
Right, the only thing I have is, you're at 90% right now. The sign is
No, that's a different, this is a
Different project.
different project, yeah.
Okay.
Transitioning from downtown to the South Carson Street project.
So I'm still a little confused on what we're doing with, we're not taking a motion to approve it right now. We're just moving this item to 4E, correct? No?
This isn't what was on the agenda, so let me be clear. This is late information brought by a member of the public right before the meeting and placed on your desk. This is not from staff, this was from Miss Mack. So this was a proposal for you to consider funding, which now I get probably belongs on an item later on the agenda. So the request before you is to authorize the expenditure of $30,000 for the design and construction of a much smaller sign on South Carson Street, so that Public Works, as they're doing the design of that portion of the project, can consider, they'll design workshop that does the landscaping portion of it. They'll work on looking at the sign and how it looks like, and design a sign to bring back for consideration and construction.
Okay, so that would be 2019 then, not 2018.
The design would be, Dan Stuckey, city engineer for the record, the design is basically starting now, and design workshop is essentially almost on board as part of a under contract to do the design. So this would be something that they would implement in their design along with landscape design and furnishing design and all that along South Carson. So the way I envision this going, if this were approved, is they would incorporate maybe some signage alternatives, maybe 3 options, initial design, come up with 3 options, and then at some point, we would select a final option and kind of advance that to final design and construction.
Okay, I think because we have 2 different things on the table here now. We have the downtown Curry Street project, and we have this, so it sounds like it's blending together. So where do you propose to have this sign erected?
The ideas that I've gotten, I've got the project manager, Tom Grundy, out in the audience, but essentially it would be probably around Stewart Street was when the $30,000 signage would start to happen. So as, cars are coming from the south, around Stewart Street is where these signage, it would, probably be a group of signs saying, hey, downtown's north, keep driving, something along those lines. I believe Miss Mack's sign is more like 5th Street, further into the downtown is where her arch idea would be.
So it's more directional signing to go, don't take Stewart, you take Carson Street for the downtown, basically.
Yes.
Or to be determined, or
Yeah,
welcome to downtown Carson City.
Yeah.
That's the kind of design process they need to go through.
Okay, Lee, just one question. So the money, the $30,000 was allocated last year, but today we're authorizing release. And the release is for the planning, correct?
Well, I think as it's put, it would release it for the design and construction. I think we're promising after design to bring it through public process, through RAC, to select a design before construction, but as proposed, it would release the funds for design and construction, and the goal being to stay within that budget on design and construction.
So this money would be allocated to Public Works for the signage. Is that what the bottom line is?
Yes, to be incorporated with the South Carson Street project, the design.
Okay, Lee, so let me make sure I'm crystallizing here. Being the new board member, I understand it was allocated last year for this budget of $30,000. So, and right now, we do not know physically where the sign is going to be placed. And those things have to be worked out, because we haven't worked those out yet.
Correct.
Okay, so but yet now you want us to approve the allocation so we can get the ball rolling, and then maybe the next meeting we'd be bringing this before the RAC committee. I'm pretty sure Dan or someone will let us know then, at that point, as to the particular locality of the sign and where it would be placed.
A future meeting will include draft design for some draft design that includes location and sign design. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then obviously, being new on the committee, were there bids given for the sign? I was noticing it's $30,000 here. I mean, I didn't see in the renderings pictures, were there other bids given?
No, it's just actually the $30,000 just came from honestly a little bit of a remainder of funds from going through the process that you're going to go through a couple items from now in allocating funds for future projects. So there was not when that 30,000 number came up, that was just kind of the redevelopment funds that were available to allocate to that activity. So in looking at it, I mean, we think we can generally come up with a design and construction that stays within that budget. That's not it's certainly not the big Carson City gateway signs that are on the freeway coming into town. Those are much far bigger than that. But a smaller monument type sign, we're figuring that would come in under this budget. So the money's not a function of the sign that we wanted to build, and then that's how much it costs. We're doing it the other way. We're going to value engineer to have them design and construct a sign within the budget.
Does this strike anyone as getting the cart before the horse? Just wanted to ask that question. I don't have a problem with design, but I have a problem with authorization of expenditure for design and construction when we haven't seen a darn thing.
And I think that's what we're struggling at up here, is trying to figure out what it is that you really need. And when's our next meeting? May?
The next regular meeting is in May, but we may have a special meeting for a facade improvement action item before then.
Do you think that perhaps that we could, if we're going to have a special meeting coming up, that we could perhaps see something more to what you're saying, John?
Plus the location, I'm really,
No,
it's
I-
really bizarre to
So
me.
I don't know if I'm being clear that, so maybe we could come up with the selection is if it's $10,000 for design, that's great, we'll move forward with that. I don't know if that's the right number or not that we've talked about, but we got to hire somebody to figure this out and how it is incorporated, and it needs to be with the design of the street, because we can't in a vacuum just decide we're going to put a sign here if that doesn't coincide with the design of the street. On the other hand, why don't they just do it as part of the design? Because it's an additional cost, and really, frankly, funds are tight for just the street portion of it. So this is an enhancement to the project. So if we want them to incorporate the sign into the design, we're asking for a little bit of money to put into the contract to pay for the sign design. And Dan, do you have any thoughts on the amount that would need to be?
For the design only? Not off the top of my head. I mean, I just wanted to point out that, I mean, for most projects, at least on the capital project side, you have a budget that covers design and construction. So I don't think what is being proposed here is really abnormal for the basic process that we go through. I mean, so I just wanted to point that out. But as far as design, I mean, typically what we use is, design's typically like 10 to 15% of the construction cost, to give you just a ballpark there.
So we're at a little bit of a catch-22. You want the money so you can show us a design so we can approve the authorization to release the funds
For the rest of it.
for the rest of it. So let me ask this question, is it possible for us to release some of the money to see a design versus all of the money? That way you can bring us a design, we can see something, and then go from there. One last question, sorry, Lee, or maybe for Dan. A little history on some of the other signage. I mean, this can't be unique that all of a sudden in 2018, we're sitting here being asked this question. What happened, if you know, from the past in the city with regards to signage, and how, was this the same process as you're saying it's not uncommon to have happen?
I was speaking to, I believe Mr. Barrett brought up, it's not typical to approve a design or have a design and construction funds go together. And so I was just pointing out on a lot of projects, you would have, funding for design and construction for a project.
Yes, but that's the overall project. This is a separate item. Is that not correct?
Yeah, but I would say like with the RAC funds for the 550 for the cross streets, we were approved for design and construction of those cross streets. So that, just an example there.
Well, it still seems a backward way to make a decision. From our standpoint.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
What's this design number? Do we have that? Or do we?
10% of 5,000.
We do.
Yeah, I would probably say 5,000 is a good number to at least get some, get a start on it. And maybe, are you guys thinking bringing some alternatives forward to see, or, a couple options that you could look at, or just a selection of the final, what it's going to look like, and then approve the remaining funds for construction? What do you guys?
Well, options are always good, but I think we, at the very least, want to see something
Okay.
versus nothing.
5,000.
Yeah, my fear is that we're just this money doesn't go very far, and we end up with a,
Yeah.
4-foot square sign or something like that.
I would say 5,000 would get us to a pretty good spot as far as, something good that you guys could feel good about approving the construction funds for.
May I ask why this isn't a part of the original project? Why it comes as a separate item? If what you tell me is accurate, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I mean, Lee can maybe better answer it than I, but I mean, we've identified funding sources for essentially a lot of the core improvements with the project. So this is just another funding source that just came to be essentially. So, it's just a different funding source for the project improvements.
As someone who's watched government most of his life and been involved in it a couple of times, it's just a pattern I'm not used to, and maybe that's a function of the CMAR process rather than the bid process. But I'm really confused by all this, because it just seems to me that the decision makers have to have something, as Ronnie said, to make a decision about. When we made the decision on the overall project, did we have a partial design at least that we were shown?
Yes, I believe for the overall project, there was a conceptual plan. I just think for maybe for signage, just because it's a little more, that's not the core project. I don't think it ever got to that conceptual level of the signage, but
as I understand it, what you're saying is to make the decisions, you had to have the overall project at a certain point before this is where we'll put this sign, and then we'll decide what it looks like. This process is kind of convoluted to me. I'm not being critical, I'm just lost in it.
And we've already authorized $200,000 for fiscal year 2019 for the South Street beautification, which to me signage is part of the beautification. So I don't think that we understood at the time that we did the 30,000 allocation what this was actually for. I was not aware of this. I don't know about the rest of you.
The $200,000 was that, so that was identified. That's specifically for the portion but it wasn't for signage, for downtown signage at all. That would not have been, because that was for the portion between Fairview and
No,
Carson
and I
City
understand that, but now we're talking basically lumping the whole thing together as part of the South Corridor project.
Yeah, they would like to construct it at once. It is two separate segments. They have to get separate. There's that northern part connecting the downtown is contingent upon a grant. Otherwise, the south part will go forward separately. And the design would stay in place for when they got funding, but the project probably wouldn't go forward for that. So, and basically the answer is they've been going forward with the design for South Carson Street. And, as he said, when it was pointed out, well, the redevelopment has funds for downtown signage, they said, oh, well, that's not in the contract that they're working on and that's not funded otherwise. So we're here asking for funding to include signs in the design, or we'll shift that funding somewhere else.
And I hope you understand, we're not being critical of you. One of the things about being in the accountability chair when you don't know everything that's going on is that people come to us and say, well, you're doing these things in stages, and then it just mounts up in cost. And so we have to answer questions of people who are asking us questions. So we want to get it straight before we, go on the record as, hey, we're just going to spend $30,000 for a sign. It's more than that, obviously, but that's what's going to get in people's heads if we're not careful. So we're just trying to be extra careful, not a criticism.
Thanks, John. Does anyone want to entertain a motion?
I will entertain a motion to allocate out of the $30,000, $5,000 for the design for the downtown entry sign.
Second.
Any public comments?
Hi, Greg Stedfield, resident of Carson City. So when I was reading the agenda items online, I think I saw 10,000 for design and 20,000 for construction. That was an estimate. So that's 50% of the construction cost, which seemed really high. Now, I kind of agree with you, Supervisor, that and I'm a civil engineer, so I deal with these things. Having two separate projects, there's going to be some issues with coordination, which is probably going to cause things to go up and not down. If those could be incorporated into either the Fairview South or the Fairview North as part of those projects, still use that money to augment the monies that are already there for the design. But if you have it within a larger project, the coordination is going to be there. The construction cost will be more in line with what it should be. That's just my thoughts. And also, on yours, it seems like your engineering cost is way higher than it should be. Just food for thought. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the motion in front of us. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Yes, unanimous. Okay, moving on to 4D. For possible action to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the expenditure of $5,000 from the fiscal year 2018 Redevelopment Revolving Fund for the purchase of a special event tent. Lee?
Okay, thank you for reading that item into the agenda. This item, like the one previously, is to authorize the expenditure of the funds. Now this one is a little bit different. It's not even as specific as signs. This is an allocation of $5,000 in a category that the RAC and Redevelopment Authority have talked about other types of special event equipment and infrastructure to support special events. That's included in the past. Movie projector, outdoor movie projector for outdoor special events. You've allocated $5,000 a year in this category, which is approximately the cost of one event tent for Fuji Park, as this request has been made. We received a request for these funds from the Cooperative Extension, who runs the fair now at Fuji Park. Lindsay's here to address this issue, and we will be talking a little bit later. You'll notice that it's interestingly, Fuji Park event tents have come up beyond this in terms of discussions with the Redevelopment Authority as something you'll be considering later, but this one is for a tent for the event that would be kept at Fuji Park. I've talked to the Parks and Rec Director, Jen Budge. There's room at Fuji Park to store these. They could let the people that rent Fuji Park use these, and they could, of course, be used for future events such as this. So that's my presentation, and the information from Lindsay and the request is attached, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Lee.
I don't really have any questions on this. To me, it's a no-brainer, not to take away your thunder, Lindsay, because, you gave us so much information here. I'm sure that the 5,000 is fine. The only question I have, so it's just to be used at Fuji, no place else?
Well, talking about this, so these are large tents and not easily transported. There's Jen Budge, I think that's up for discussion, but the preference would be for that to be left there, so there's some liability about letting them go out and be transported and set up. So there's concerns there, but they're large, but certainly they could be stored and used at Fuji Park for events.
Well, in my opinion, it's a long time coming, and I think it's a good expenditure of funds, and it's one of those that we've already allocated the $5,000 for. So, again, not to take your thunder, Lindsay, but I think it's a good use of the monies that we have already allocated the $5,000 for.
I do have a question, too, so maybe you can have some thunder here. How many, you're saying tents, obviously it's 5,000, which pretty much covers one tent. I know these are large tents because I own several of them that we use, and they're not easy to take up or to put up and take down. It's quite a long process. So my question would be, how often is that necessarily going to happen? Is it going to stay up? If it is going to stay up, where would it stay up? Because like I said, it's a process of multiple people working about 6 to 8 hours to get one of those up, so.
Lindsay Chichester, Cooperative Extension Educator, for the record. So in briefly talking with Jen today, and I'm sure that we'd have to have several conversations to kind of work out some of the logistics of storage and rental and return and setup. So our office specifically is trying to find out if we get these for the fair, if we can buy labor time to set them up. We're not equipped with the skills nor physiques to handle that ourselves, but, can we buy labor to then set them up and take them down? One of them is stakes, of course, which the tents come with, but it was also recommended when talking with some of these companies that they use the concrete barriers to tie them to, which sounds to me like a way easier option. Then it becomes a coordination issue with Parks or Public Works to get those in place, moving them and stuff like that. So we'd have to explore some of the options. And I think this first year would definitely be a learning lesson for all of us on some best practices and what works and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you. John?
I assume the city owns this tent?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so is this are we replacing a tent, or are we adding a new existing tent, or is this just the first time we're getting a tent?
Well, 2 tents exist that the city owns that used to belong with the ice skating facility.
Okay.
This would be a purchase of 1 or 2 more tents, depending on what is recommended, that would then belong to the city. So they would be new tents.
What condition are the other tents around, the 2 you mentioned?
From what I understand, the frame and the top is good. The walls would need to be replaced. But for my specific event in July, we don't need walls. Now, if
Okay.
someone else uses them at this time of year, they might consider needing to be replaced then.
Okay. And I heard Lee mention that you can use these to be available for other events, for organizations or what have you. There'll be no cost to the other organizations, or they would have submit a proposal or something in order to use the tent? How would that work?
So there's a rental fee for Fuji Park for events. So it would be incorporated into the rental fee if they need to use the tents. To answer your question too about what happens now, so for larger events, they rent and hire outside firms. So these organizations come in, if they have an event, they rent tents that they need. So these would be on site, presumably to these organizations be cheaper then, because they're on site ready to go, incorporated into the rent of the facility, than having to go out and pay vendors to come out and set them up. And I think that's where some of the logistics that need to be worked out come in, because the city hasn't necessarily been in the business of setting up tents and putting them down for each event that comes in. They have a tent that's, Jen said, was in pretty bad shape that they used to use at the skating rink that needs to be replaced.
And what would the cost for the individuals or groups to rent the tents?
That would be determined, I would.
So that has not been determined? Okay, thank you.
And did I hear correctly, Lee, you said the whole tent has to be replaced, or just the walls that she was talking about on the one from the old
I
Arlington?
didn't get into that much detail
Oh,
with
okay.
Jennifer Bunch.
Okay.
And those tents that were for the ice skating rink were rather small. I'm thinking this is going to be much bigger. So are you going to use this in the grass area or to expand out in where the dog park area is?
It would be on the west side near the dog park area to cover the livestock animals.
Right, so this would really expand the use of the park then, which is not covered at the moment, but those other tents are pretty bad.
I just want to say I think it's a great idea and something that would be utilized by people. And I would also highly recommend using concrete with the winds we have around here, because I learned that lesson the hard way many years ago. So, anyone else? Do I hear a motion? Any other public comments? No, thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you all.
Okay.
I move to recommend to the Redevelopment Authority approval of the expenditure of $5,000 from the fiscal year 2018 Redevelopment Revolving Fund for the purchase of a special event tent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Sorry, Lindsay. You were all prepared for a big one.
My work was done ahead of time.
Okay, item 4E, for possible action to make recommendations to the Redevelopment Authority regarding allocation of redevelopment undesignated funds for fiscal year 2019 and estimating future allocations for the following 4 years to implement redevelopment objectives. Lee?
Okay, this is the annual, for the last 2 or 3 years, annual allocation plan of recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, the Redevelopment Authority Board of Supervisors, for them to incorporate certain activities into their budget. We're starting the budget planning process for fiscal year 19 now, starting July 1st of this year. So this is the timing for that. And then also we've been allocating funds that going into four years beyond that, using projections from finance on how much would be available in redevelopment. It's allowed RAC and the Redevelopment Authority to have a little bit of a future planning for the allocation of funds, as we've kind of discussed. So we up there on the screen that I've left up for these other items, the upper part being the allocation plan that was part of what RAC recommended and the Board of Supervisors approved last year. The new part to that is the far right-hand column, adding another year, so that part is up for discussion. As it's drafted in there, that would basically continue the funding that's been assigned per your policy so far, with pretty much funding carrying across, except for special event funding continuing to go down. The other really important numbers to look at on this sheet are the bottom row, because this is the undesignated. This is basically the available funding, short of taking money from other activities. This is the available funding for allocation in this year and future years. And this is not aggregate going across. This is for example, actually, and we'll get back to this as I have this set up. You can roll forward funds. There's actually $68,859 that is available actually in this year's budget. This is what the current budget actually looks like in your 5-year projection here, where there's $68,000 now. Basically, reason I already rolled that forward in kind of the draft spreadsheet is because anything you're looking at now of these projects probably wouldn't be even started to be implemented into next budget year. So as I have this spreadsheet set up, when you put it into the roll forward, it'll push funds forward. So when we get into working with this spreadsheet, just know that that's there. So we have the programs above that are certainly on the table for your discussion and recommendations. I won't go through the details of every one of those. I hope if you read the staff report, those should be familiar to you. There's a little on the bottom ones. These are items that have specifically come up, and they're in the staff report as well, that have specifically come up either through discussions with the Citizens Committee here or with the Redevelopment Authority. Now I would suggest, based on the discussion earlier, for your consideration would be adding the downtown archway, downtown gateway project. Just to go through those real quick, the Bob Boldrick Theater seat replacement, again, talking with Parks and Rec on that, that's approximately in total, a $600,000 project. That's not just replacing the seats. The seat removal replacement and redoing the pavement, installing 700 new seats is about half that. That's about $300,000. Of that $600,000, the Parks and Rec Department has about $170,000 now in Parks and Rec funds that are assigned to that project, but that leaves $430,000 unfunded. The community center has been identified over the last couple of years as a pretty high priority by the Board of Supervisors. It's in the it's in the, forget the name of the sales tax plan, expenditure plan, with the 8-cent sales tax that's part of the downtown, that was part of the MAC and everything. It's part of that, but the timing of the theater is well down the road if relying just on that funding, and it was always that. It was kind of the last in the line of projects, but the seats in the theater are pretty bad. They're hoping to get funding to tie it together with that. If they can get additional funding from other sources, they can get that done sooner. The Children's Museum Playground, I've pulled that out. That used to be part of the side street improvements in the allocation, and that was kind of one of the $100,000 identified for that that's been pushed out into the future. And I actually want to note that I have a presentation from them for you. Is when it's time for the public for them to come up, I have a presentation that they have to show you something about that. But my understanding is that project has been reduced from a complete streetscape change and improvement to just an on-site enclosed playground area. So they'll do a presentation on that. Fuji Fairgrounds Arena sound system and portable event sound systems are two items that came up at the Redevelopment Authority. With the Fuji Park Fairgrounds Arena system being a larger ticket item at about $75,000 to $100,000, with the portable sound system event that came up in conjunction with an event that was at McFadden Plaza that was using an existing portable sound system that the Parks and Rec had previously, not necessarily for that venue, but it was noted that a little bit better system is needed, which would cost about $5,000. Again, going back to Fuji Park tents brought up, I think that was, if not by RAC, that was certainly discussed at the Redevelopment Authority meeting. But again, possibly allocating, this was one tent. You could see these large event tents that are typically used at Fuji Park are about $5,000 each. So it was put on the list to consider for more event tents on the site. As you've noted, that there's some logistics that come with that, but it would make more tents available for the events that go on there. Building Clearance Assistance Program, that's the item that I sent a correction on because I had Cactus Jacks on my mind from other discussions talking about the downtown alley. And what I meant to say was for the demolition clearance would not be Cactus Jacks. They're doing great improvements there. But Jack's Bar is one that's come up where there's some turnover and some investment opportunities possibly being looked at for that. But because it's a historic building and can't necessarily just take the wrecking ball to it and walk away from it, there's some additional cost to that if the city, if its redevelopment could possibly help with that, might help redevelop that site. Which, as I note in here, I know there's some historic district issues that come along with that. It would certainly, almost certainly involve disassembling it with some care so that the facade can be reused in some form and put back in place to preserve the historic nature of the building. The Downtown Housing Assistance Program is something that came up both here and at RAC that can be considered something similar to the facade improvement program to help encourage housing downtown. We could look at different examples of that, but want to see if there's a interest in funding that. And then we could, not on the list, again, as I mentioned, we could add the Downtown Gateway Arch for your consideration. So I'll almost done. I'll conclude there with any presentation on this stuff. What I suggest you do is take public comment, learn more about these projects from the public, get their input. What we've done in the past, if it works for you, is to go to actually let each member rank it. If you can come to some consensus, great. If you want to go through individually and rank it, we can get your average rank and see if you can, for each project, and come to a consensus that way and reformat them, and then come back and see how you're going to figure out how to fund the priority items over the next 5 years. So, to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. At this time, would like to open it up for public comment.
Doreen Mack, president of the Downtown 2020 Group. Ronnie, I'd like to say, as I was going through these costs, that the cost of that arch was for one arch from Q&D, not for two. And he says on there that it does not include engineering, permits, fees, and other soft goods. That's where I'm allowing for the extra in this cost, and knowing that the one on the north end is going to run more. So say at the high end, just with this and not knowing the extra cost, it could come up to $780. So I was figuring that my allowing for that extra fees in there for extra stuff coming up was in the ballpark, I feel. We did do this presentation to the arch with the mayor, and he, it's gotten nothing but positive results, feedback back on this. But again, it's finding the money to start. And that's where we're at with it, is to get an engineer so we can start working on the costs for the whole thing. And we don't have the costs for that for the other arch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, real quick, I had one more thing I meant to, so I said I wasn't going to give you updates on any of the prior ones, but I did miss one. So the Reimagine Public Art Space program has been allocated $10,000 in this fiscal year. You do have a piece of late material that we sent out and should be in your packets from Mark Salinas, the arts director, and he is here to give you an update on that when you want it. But I did want to note there's an update here, and he's here to answer any questions you might have about that program.
Okay, thank you, Lee. We'll continue with public comment. So, come on up.
Thank you. Mark Salinas, Director of Arts and Culture, for the record. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. Mr. Smith, welcome to Carson City. I myself have been here 15 months. I have found it to be a very warm and welcoming community. Thank you for your service. So, in March of 2017, the committee and later the Board of Supervisors approved the allocation of line item 13, which is in the amount of $10,000 for Reimagine Space public program. As mentioned, now that I've been here 15 months, I've had the ability to get my feet underneath me to see the depth of my responsibilities and the responsibilities of a project like this. In June of 2017, I was notified that a grant that I had written for on behalf of the Carson City was awarded. It's a National Endowment of the Arts grant. It's the first time in 8 years any organization has been awarded this grant, and we're the only recipient this year. And this is a grant it's a literary grant which challenges communities to create 30 days of public programming to push the boundaries of reader engagement. My two partners for the grant, which I wrote, was our state library and our city library and our state art museum. With this opportunity, I was looking to dovetail line item 13 into what's called the Big Read project. While the Reimagine Space program was charged with taking another look at blight and vacancy and how we can drive more traffic and focus upon those properties, those commercial properties, my proposal to use this money by the end of fiscal year 17-18, so by the end of June, let's say, would be to use it towards the events which are scheduled for the month of May and the first week of June of this year. Some of the partners that we have on board is WNC, of course, the library. I actually have 4 casinos, 2 of which are on the committee involved in this. That's the canceled cards I've been collecting from your casinos for quite a while. I have about 100 pounds of canceled cards that we're going to allocate to the theme. The theme of the book that I selected is Charles Portis's True Grit, which is the story of a one-eyed, debauched marshal who is hired by a 14-year-old girl to avenge the murder of her father. And this takes place in the 1870s, which is a really great fit for the community that we're in and the establishments that are already here. WNC will take part in it, Stewart Indian, the library, the BAC. We're really trying to include as many businesses, nonprofit, arts organizations as much as we can across the map of Carson City. And what I had originally planned to do as far as, being that I'm from NYC, I'll call it like Macy's-style windows for vacant properties. I'm trying to dovetail it into a similar direction. Lee, I have some images. May I pass those out? Okay. Yeah, certainly. Thanks. So, thank you. This is one property which I've been in contact with. It's a vacant commercial property on North Stewart and East Proctor. I've reached out to the property owner and got confirmation to continue the discussion. What this is a wheat paste installation by Dean Reynolds. He's a former board member of Nevada Arts Council, our state arts agency. He has pieces in the collection of the Nevada Museum of Art. He's shown at the U.S. Senate Rotunda. A wheat paste installation is much like, let's say, wallpaper. Digital print is printed onto paper, and that paper with wheat paste is put outdoors. What you see there is a Photoshop image of a typical Western image juxtaposed to, cars and RVs, which would typically be parked out there. The image that you see there is approximately 10 foot by 28 feet. Mr. Reynolds lives in Eureka, and I think he's his portfolio represents, I think, some great imagery that would go hand in hand with True Grit. Of course, that is the backside of a vacant property whose front door is on Stewart Street. Another property I've reached out to is on Carson Street, just north of McFadden Plaza, and that would be for a proposed vinyl wrap upon the glass windows of the property, which is typically vacant when we're not in session. So those are two ideas that I had. Of course, several events are going to be happening within the redevelopment district, as I mentioned, kicking off May 3rd and ending June 5th. And I just wanted to give you an update and the opportunity to ask me any questions about the expenditure of that money. I know it's been rolled over into this year, and I do have plans for it.
Thank you, Mark. I think you've got some really great ideas that you've brought before us today. I like the Macy's window idea, if you will, as well. So I'd like to open up to the board for any questions.
I have one. Actually, a couple of comments, too. I think I understood the amount of that grant, but remind us, how much is that grant that you got?
The maximum was an award of $20,000.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've applied for it, and we won 14. And that's a one-to-one match, so that includes in-kind donations.
Okay. So, and as a comment, I don't know if you've ever talked to Rob McFadden, who lives in the house that was the shootist house. He has a cardboard cutout of Marion Morrison, otherwise known as John Wayne, who was in both the shootist here, filmed here, and in True Grit when it was made into a movie.
It is on my radar.
All right, good. Just wanted to suggest, yes.
The novel was in '69 made into the movie that John Wayne and Glenn Campbell starred in. Mm-hmm. The 2010 film starred Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon. Both of those movies will be screened for free with a valid library card in Carson City. So. Getting back to the original intent of the Remed space was actually to go in the space and activate it. I'm opting now, having seen the complexity of that, is to do something on the exterior of that space, but still in vacant properties.
I assume then that you haven't bought a lot of the stuff that we talked about when we gave you the original reimagination money to do those windows.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Good.
Any other comments? Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Is this yours? Yes, it is. Thank you.
Not to me, to advance.
Okay, I'll give you the little cue of next. Good evening. My name is Beth Ellis. I'm the director of the Children's Museum. My favorite sidekick is Casey Gillis, president of our board. We have a dream, and I'm the new kid on the block as well, and new to this project that was started years ago and has kind of been put to the side, and now we're feeling that perhaps it could be brought back up to the forefront and given some consideration. So here's an image of the Children's Museum as it is today. You'll see we have the wrought iron fence out in front that does not go all the way around the property, leaves opening on Carson Street for entrance into the museum. Thank you. Next. I would like to just share with you very quickly the Children's Museum's, what our desire is, what we present: a play-based learning environment featuring hands-on learning adventures in the arts, sciences, and humanities that bring the joy and wonder of discovery to children, together with their families from all economic and cultural backgrounds. Thank you. A couple of fun little quotes. Play is the beginning of knowledge by George Dorsey, and almost all creativity involves purposeful play by Abraham Maslow. So why are we here today? We have this wonderful building, but it's all indoors, and we lack an outdoor space to carry forth our mission with. Thank you. Okay, we don't have a lot of space. This would be ideal. However, we do have this space. An historic building. It's been since the 1930s. This is taken from the Historical Society. The street that you see that's open there on the right is now where the Back on Track is located. As you can see, we have open space there in the front, and not a whole lot there. So when you look at the image today, it gives you an idea of how much growth has taken place with the trees that we have that are in the front of our building. Thank you very much. You may continue. So originally, the plan was with J.P. Koppoulos. Did I say that right? Yes? Koppoulos. Thank you very much. When I called him, I said, JP, you don't know me, I don't know you, but I'd like to just tell you a little bit about, in my conversation with Ronnie, that we might be able to bring this project back up. He came over like the next day, and he was like, okay, what's going on? So I don't have a picture of the original plan, but originally the plan was on the right side of the building, thank you, where those indented car spaces are, was to pull that area off and create a park on the side of the museum. However, with the redevelopment of Carson City, the street, configuration has changed, and we kind of thought, after talking to JP and walking out in the middle of Carson Street and crossing the street and looking at our building, we kind of thought, maybe it's time for a new idea. So, thank you. In looking at the project area, we have now thought about creating a project that would take place on the front of the building as you pass down Carson Street. Thank you. JP drew this up very quickly, but if you would please allow your eyes to follow the blue and yellow line and go around the side, and not just the black and not just the checkered part, but bring the checkered part down farther, and I didn't have a chance. He did this so quickly for me. What we would like to do is, in the front of the museum, create an open space area, and then take the metal gates or fencing, thank you, and repurpose it and put it along Carson Street so that the entrance to the museum is now on the right side. Thank you. You may. And the idea that we have for what type of outdoor area we'd like to place in there is more organic. And as far as what we've seen around Carson City, we feel like it would go with a palette of xeriscaping and not create more grass for the city to have to cut, since we are a city building, but create more of the chipping and the wooded areas. And if you could continue, create an open area for play and interactive activities for children, as well as perhaps a wood table where children could experiment and play with different types of mediums, and maybe something like this, an outdoor music area, and maybe a sand area, and maybe an area that incorporates various ideas of play and interaction with children to bring about their imagination. And then right here is just an open area, yeah. I know I'm trying to give you the right, again, keeping it somewhat open so that we would not invite people to necessarily come in and make a home there, but to keep it a safe place for the children to play. And then I love this idea of a little swing to go off of the tree. We have two beautiful trees that are a part of the property. A lot of these ideas came from a book called Natural Playscapes, which is a fabulous book that we are looking into, and we are somewhat designing after that. This is all very quickly thrown together, so I will try my best, as well as with Casey, to answer some questions that you might have. But this is something that we would like to have reconsidered.
I guess the first question is, what is this? Do you have a budget for this?
Yes, we were hoping to use the redevelopment funds, and then we were hoping to get grants to provide an opportunity to create the outdoor play space. And then we would use the funds to actually bring back the fence, the railing, and pull out the cement, perhaps. Not sure how far those funds would go, but that is kind of along the lines where we thought we would start with that, and then get work on grants and such to get the different types of materials brought in to create the outdoor space. We haven't really, we just kind of put this together. I do know that in looking at different websites, that the appeal to doing an outdoor space like this, more organic, it is considerably less cost than what would be otherwise if we were to put in a plastic structure or try to create a McDonald's type of environment in front of our museum. It'd be much more organic and much more, I don't know, I think appealing as far as from a street, driving down the street and what you might see in front of the museum. More of an appeal. Did I say it right?
I think so.
Okay.
We kind of feel we're in kind of a strange situation because Beth has just come to the museum this summer. I've been on the board for a few years, but as a administrator for Carson City School Districts, I didn't have a lot of time. Now I'm retired and we're kind of working together on it. I think what we realize we didn't come with a set figure or even any real knowledge. We know that there could be funds. We know that we have a lot more to do. But because this is different from the original, back when, I think it goes back clear to Jim Peckham at one point, the idea that side part of the side street would be the water squirting up. Well, we now have that at McFadden Center. We don't need to do that. An amphitheater, we really don't need that. And as we looked, that's the north side of the building. And it's cold. And it's dark a lot of the day. So Beth's dream or vision was, again, to keep it simple, move this to the front so as people drive by, they are going, wow, there's kids out there having a good time. Wonder what that building is. Wonder what, should we stop here? Because a lot of people, because we're set back, drive by, and even with the signs, they're not sure what it is. So I think our purpose tonight is just to ask you, if we were to go forward and get more information, is this a type of a project you would even think should be on the main street or should be part of what we're doing? Because there's no point us going further if everybody thinks, nah, we don't want that on the main street. So that's we're kind of here more for advice than we are to give you a figure.
Well,
And could you please identify yourself?
I'm sorry. I'm Casey Gillis, and I'm the new board president for the museum.
okay. Let me say this. Of course, being a 32-year veteran educator, children are very close and near and dear to my heart. But I appreciate your clarity, your convictions, and your communication of the information to us. But we would like to know, in somewhere between a penny and the American national debt, you have a price. Okay? So it would behoove you to come back to us with some figures and let the board decide. We want to be good stewards of the dollars, and yet we want to put them in the appropriate and right opportunities, but you need to bring a number back to us. And so I think that if you do that, the board will probably be more susceptible into hearing your request and maybe approving it. My question, how much square footage, if you know that the outside of the parking lot or the area that the children will have to play?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying. See, the more information you can bring back, I think will give us more, information to hear in order to make a good decision. At least for me, it will. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Beth, you are correct. This is way different because at one time we were looking at closing that parking area on the right-hand side, which you're not doing, and then having the school district work with you so that would be play area or pre-kindergarten or whatever it was. So it's a completely different design, which is neither here nor there, but it's very, very different.
To do what the original design was, we would have to ask the city to change what they just put in last summer. They extended the curb on the other side, so the entry into the street that was originally thought will make it smaller and be able to take some of the parking to make this playground. One thing, though, I will say that whatever we come back to you with would be a structure that is safe for students so that if groups did come, the students would be safe. The rest of the children, and not that we wouldn't care, not that we're not caring about safety, the visitors to the museum the children are always with an adult. They don't come alone. So you also have that even if they were out there, there's an adult with them, their parents or caregiver.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for this.
Thank you, Beth. Any more public comment tonight? Nope, okay. So it doesn't look like we're allocating any funds on this, so is it actionable, or was this more informational, or are we going to, what did you want to do with the survey, Lee, necessarily?
Yeah, so what we typically do for this is to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority on possible expenditures and allocations for the next budget year, that FY19 column here, and then for future years. Again, as you can see, if there's new programs, new projects, there's money available, more becomes available in fiscal year 2020, and that's because, by the way, the Michael Hole repayment starts ending there, so that's why a lot more becomes available after that year. But yeah, we're looking for a recommendation from RAC. So what we've done in the past is, again, so we have the existing things and we can come back and play with the numbers there. We could start off by prioritizing. So part of what's on the agenda is to prioritize and make recommendations on allocation. So we could start by prioritizing by, for example, putting the, giving your rank as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 projects on here down. And, the spreadsheet here will rank them based on your individual rankings. You can have some discussion on that. We'd put them back into the spreadsheet on the other side, and you can make recommendations on funding. Again, I always have to caveat this, your first priority may not be able to be funded this year because it's the most expensive thing. But I think the board wants to know what the priorities are for these projects moving forward.
All right, the question that I have, goes back to what we've been struggling with earlier in the evening, is you have a couple of things there. We have Bob Boldrick Theater replacement, the cost. The Children's Museum we don't have as yet. Fuji sound system we know. Portable event sound system we know. We want more tents, I guess. And then we have no funding at all allocated or even considered for the Building Clearance Assistance Program or for the Downtown Housing Assistance Program. The Downtown Arches, we know that that's going to be quite high, and not sure what that's about. But, I don't want to get into the point again of where we are going to be blindsided by saying, okay, this is number one priority, and not knowing what the funding is going to be, because we don't have all the funding in our packet here.
So I think in this case, you're prioritizing the program or project depending on what it is.
But how can you prioritize without a dollar funding mechanism? How would I know how much the housing assistance program is going to cost?
So this is a very much chicken and the egg discussion then again, because you need to tell us how much effort to put into these. We can't provide cost estimates for 12 to 7, 8 different things in detail if only one of them is going to get funded and it's priority. So you need to first, what's the priority? And I think we need to drill down. Do you even want to allocate redevelopment funds to certain activities or not? Is how we've approached it in the past.
Well, that brings to mind a question about when you bring up the Bob Boldrick Theater. There was some discussion at some point that I remember where question was raised as to whether you do the seats now and the rest of it that would be staging upgrades for, what goes in there. If you separated that, would that cost more money? I assume it would, and then the $600,000 estimate.
I'm not sure how that factors into the estimate. For example, the $300,000 for the replacement and reinstallation of seats, but it's also $50,000 to resurface and treat the concrete floor. So when you tear the seats out, aren't you going to
So that's the question I'm asking
too?
is it cheaper to do it all at once, or can you do it in 2 stages? 2 stages, 2 phases. Let's keep the stage off of the question.
Right, and again, back to the discussion earlier, the more you can group projects together for a combination of design or phases of construction, you probably get a cost savings. But there are elements of the communities, of the theater improvements that could be separate. For example, the flooring and seats could be separate than the acoustic panels and painting of and other improvements in there.
Well, the point you made earlier is true. They're just awful. The seats are just awful. And it's no secret that when I ran and even after that, I've talked about those seats over and over again. As a board member, though, I come here and I don't want to try and Bigfoot anything or say, oh, my priorities are more important than the rack. But I'm on record as saying that. I'm also on record as having said I'd like to see some kind of a extension of the facade program into the insides, but I'm not sure. Ronnie kind of called me on that one at a previous board meeting, and to an extent she's right. It's hard if they can't see it to call it part of the facade program, and it also gets into the question of public-private. So I would say in terms of any ranking I have, the seats are really important for me, but I'm always favoring Arts and Culture Commission events. So those are my 3. But I went first because I don't want to tell anybody else what to do.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm serious.
I believe you. And I'm on your side.
I'm a liaison here, and I don't want to be saying, you ought to listen to me. You guys say what you want. If I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted. I'll get another vote later anyway.
Well, I went through this pretty much, and I think, before I start getting into it, I think maybe everybody else should get a comment, because I know where I'm going on this.
I had one comment. The building clearance assistant program, you said that that's a allowable way to spend our funds. Is that, I have a real problem with calling it just building clearance, because we've had a lot of buildings, great and small, like I could say the Roundhouse, the Penguin, that have been cleared and replaced with a vacant lot. So does it have to be that way, or is it a rehabilitation? It's, a clear design. That's
Right, and this is one of those things where, again, I hope Mr. Barry would say I'm sorry for not having the information that you would like to have on something like this, but it's something that came up from the Board of Supervisors. I don't personally have any involvement directly with any specific property owners on what it would be. It's hard. So this one in particular is kind of a hard one for me to explain and decide to allocate funds when we don't know what building we're talking about, and even if we do, we don't have a cost estimate on how much is needed. But I think it's a start to be informative if that's important, but it's probably more important depending on what property we're talking about.
Well, if we're talking about Jack's Bar, I did talk to Kim Fagan the other day.
Thank you.
And she did get some estimates. I mean, you have a lot of problems here. You've got the Historical Commission and a whole lot of other things in between here, and they've tried to do this in the past. But she estimates over $200,000 to take that down, to rebuild it, and to what the Historical Society probably would want, which they wanted to do years ago and were turned down.
And you probably mean an extra 200,000, or
that's about what it would call to take it down brick by brick.
Yeah.
Okay, which is what the Historical Society wanted years ago when they were going to do it that way, and the Historical Society said no. But they would take it down brick by brick, and then they'd have to rebuild the whole inside, and it just doesn't pencil out at all as it relates to, they would like to sell it, actually. And this is one of those kinds of things that I don't think, she did not know anything about this. Nobody has talked to her on this. So I think before we can even consider this, you got to talk to the property owner and the Historical Society and all those other people.
Could I ask you a question, Ronnie, in terms of that property? Did she say anything? Did she say, actually, we'd like to sell it? Is that what she told you?
Everything's for sale.
Well, they'd like to sell it, but they haven't had an offer that works for them, I take it.
I didn't ask her whether they had any offers or not, but I mean, everything is for sale. So, but just like the Ormsby House, it's going to be hard to pencil it out. It's going to be very extensive to rebuild the entire inside, because it's a new construction and it's just the outside. And Court, you know more about this than I do, so I'm just the messenger here. So.
Second question, you say the Historical Society. Do you mean the state or the city?
Probably both, but originally the city.
I understood by just talk I've heard that the state's tough to get through too, yeah.
Well, I'll go. I agree. I think if I'm going to be ranking, obviously I have an issue with the building clearance, as we've all just stated. The tents, we've already approved $5,000 for a big tent, so that can possibly move down towards the bottom of my list. I think the theater seat replacement is important as well. I think the portable event sound system is almost a no-brainer because it's not very much money, and I think that is something that's going to benefit the people that are using the spaces within the city. And then put up the Children's Museum. So that's kind of where I am. I don't know if you want actual ranks, but...
Yeah, I set it up for each of you to give a number ranked 1 through
Okay, I'll go.
8.
Theater 1, portable sound system 2, children's museum, arena sound system. Portable sound system 2, children's museum 3, Fuji sound system 4, Arches 5, housing assistance 6, and building clearance 7, just because of what we talked about.
I can go. I think again, next to Court's list. The only thing I'd swap is the Children's Museum and the Fuji Arena sound system. So I'd go 1, 4, 3, and then everything else I would agree.
Retreat coffee.
I would agree with Court too, but I would switch Children's Museum to 2. And the portable event system to 3.
Lee, I would, I'm going to take a different twist on this. And I would like to rank the Children's Museum as 1. I'm sorry.
Your mic.
I would like to rank the Children's Museum as 1, but they didn't have any real numbers for me this evening to even think about. So I'm going to put Children's Museum Playground 2, the Theater 1, Fuji Sound System 3, followed with the Arena Sound System 4.
This 3 that way?
Yes. And everything else down the order 5, 6, 7, 8.
You're up, Ryan.
Oh, I'm up, okay. The theater is definitely number 1.
Mike.
I thought I was talking loud enough, sorry. Definitely number 1. I would say the Fuji Fairgrounds Arena sound system is number 2 because that is very lacking. And if we want to grow that, we need that. I would say number 3 would be the portable event sound system over at McFadden Plaza, because I've had problems with that one myself. 4 is the museum playground. And then you can just do 5, 6, and 7 after that.
Quick question, if we got the portable event sound system, couldn't that be utilized inside the arena at Fuji Park?
No, it's the outdoor where the horses and everything is. That is the worst sound system in the world. You can't hear anything. So it comes from that little box thing up there. It's terrible. So I think you really need to have that sound system, and it may be less expensive. I don't know where these monies came from, but it is needed if we want to grow that.
Okay, so ranked, that would be the orders. Anybody want to change their vote before I move back to the other page?
No, but I want to say once again that both of the things I talked about at the beginning, I had already talked about many times. So I wasn't really trying to. I'm sure I did.
Okay, now as I was saying earlier, the fact that you rank something very high doesn't mean you have the money to fund it this year.
Now he tells us.
But so, hang on, how am I going to get that out of the way? Right, so now let me think about how we've done this. I mean, I think we have to just start taking suggestions from RAC members through the chair to fill in the blanks. The money will change down here as we fund things, so I can, on the fly here, start filling in the blanks starting in FY19, starting with the available of a little over $68,000. Again, not that you have to allocate every dollar every year. You can roll forward funds to future years to build up larger amounts of funds for projects.
Mr. Chairman, before you go, can I make some, before we go into the allocation, I have some comments to make on this year's funding.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay. The utility, there is some funds that I'd like to discuss, if at all possible. For example, we have the facade improvement for downtown, and I was just wondering whether or not for the future that we can reduce that for at least 1 year or so to $50,000 instead of $100,000, because of the fact that we have already allocated so much in the downtown core, and $100,000 seems like an awful lot of money. And use that money for maybe the number one. The other one is, and I know it's bolded, but we have the Blue Line rehab for $26,000, and maybe take this out of the budget because of the fact that they are not even looking at this point at the Blue Line to do what they want as far as striping it, according to you. So that's another $26,000, so that seems sketchy at this point. The other one that I don't think any of us really understood is the utility extension fund, which is $20,000 that really can be taken out. I mean, I'm trying to make the money here that they could possibly start something at the center. I know that they have a quote of $600,000, but if you take the money from the facade improvement program, the $50,000 plus the undesignated, and I'm talking the undesignated funds as well, plus the $26,000, you've got about $146,000 that can come out of this year's budget plus part of next year's budget that might be able to give them a heck of a boost for their seats and the whole thing. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to throw out before we really got into the budget process. Is this at all possibly?
So let me just clarify the Blue Line rehabilitation. They are actually counting on that funds to do the Blue Line tour. They're not literally going to repaint a blue stripe down the sidewalk anymore. They're looking at more permanent solutions to identify the Blue Line tour.
Like what? Because that's not really in here. I mean, they were talking in here, and they already have funding from the state to do.
So when this was approved by the Board of Supervisors, it was approved for $26,000 and to look at more permanent solutions to identify so we don't continue to repaint a blue line on the sidewalk. So I haven't been in the meetings, but they're talking about permanent medallions in conjunction with signage and also in conjunction with an app. So it's going to be much more than this, and the Cultural Arts and Culture Commission.
The only thing is that I do know, and he's not here anymore. Oh, yes, you are here, Mark. Is that there was funding granted from the Department of Tourism for the app.
Right. But that doesn't cover the whole project. Public Works has been working with the Cultural, not the Cultural Commission, the Arts and Tourism Board and Authority, Arts and Tourism.
Okay, so you're just telling me that $26,000 is out, it is spoken for, even though it's not what we had originally wanted.
It may not be the recommendation that went to the Redevelopment Authority Board of Supervisors, but the Board of Supervisors clearly authorized the funding to be spent on improving the Blue Line, and looking at a solution that did not necessarily include repainting a blue line that needed to be repainted over and over. So I think that what they are going forward with is in conjunction with what was approved for that expenditure.
This goes to my self-deprecating comment in the last meeting where I didn't understand exactly what they were doing, because I said I'm still kind of a follow the breadcrumbs kind of guy. So if you're not going to do that line, how are you going to do it? And that's the explanation I got, with an app and with medallions and et cetera.
Right, well, there's funding sources other than redevelopment, which is through the tourism, which they've already gotten parts of it. And that is the only thing that, I think that one of our biggest, and I'm on your side, our biggest blights, if you will, even though it's internal, is the community center. I mean, that is so overused, and the seats are so low that most of us can't even get up from them. And I was just looking through the budget to see how we could get this moved forward, and that was part of it. So if it cannot be done, it cannot be done, but I did not know that.
We're on the same page, and now that gym isn't being used, you can do staging that would make this into a facility for all kinds of music or theater, that it would put this place, this particular place on the map for the community and for those outside. But let's look for the money wherever we can find it.
So anyway, that was my input.
And to complete the answer for that upper portion, that's certainly part of the discussion to, if it's a recommendation to fund the facade improvement program less, then that would provide more available for other programs, as I said earlier. So that's perfectly valid.
Leads to a question, Lee. Have we got people lined up, or are they dried up on coming in for facade money?
So anything that is not spent from the past years has already been carried forward and is accounted for in the undesignated. Of the $100,000 for this year, you've authorized expenditure of $25,000, and I have one application in. I just got one application in that maybe possibly for $25,000, but it's probably not even that much.
That sort of matches up with Ronnie's 50 then.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, I would like to see it become even a competition rather than just, here's your funds. I'd rather see, I'd have a choice between programs to fund if it comes that way. So if we did reduce the funding, I'd support that as well.
Sounds good.
Okay, so moving forward, I guess, Lee, you're looking for us to, it's kind of hard again because it's the chicken and the egg, and to a degree, with how much some of these things are, and we don't know. So that's just kind of hard to do. It's fundamentally kind of hard. I mean, we know how much, we know an idea on how much the theater is going to be. You told us what the portable sound system is, but with some of this other stuff, I have a hard time putting an actual number in there without knowing
what it is.
Yeah, I don't even have a ballpark guess on some of them.
Well, one thing on the seats, I mean, that looks like a project we need to group it and we need to bunch it together and find a year where that's even going to work. We can't spread that over 5 years, so.
Yeah.
But I think what they're looking at is they're looking at this basically now. So they have some money, and that was the Quality of Life Fund, Lee, that was the name of the thing. So to take that out, but even if you have to keep that $26,000 in, it still gives you $120,000 that could come out between this year and next year. And that's a heck of a seed money. And then perhaps the Board of Supervisors has to go through it and determine if there's any money they got quite a bit of money left over, so maybe this is a good use of that expenditure. I don't know. But I thought that would be a great thing for as a redevelopment, since it is in the redevelopment district, to be able to say, all right, we're funding at least a sixth of it.
How much did you say Parks and Rec had in the Quality of Life money left over? 170 something?
170,000. So just to help a little bit, I think we did this same thing last year. Ronnie brought up the utility extension program. So by this time of the year, if there's not a project in that's going forward that needs assistance, it's not going to happen before the fiscal year. So I've just taken the liberty of doing 20,000 to zero there for under this current year, which can carry forward that 20,000 down here to roll forward. So now, and reduce the facade improvement to 50,000, and now you have undesignated of 138,000 for next fiscal year.
And where are we again on the current fiscal year for the facade improvement?
And the current fiscal, yeah, right, for the $100,000 that's here is at less than $50,000, 50,000 or less.
And you say you have one more.
Well, no, with the additional one coming in, it will be $50,000 or less.
So we could be able to take that down to 50,000 then, correct? For fiscal year 2018?
If you're not going to take any, yeah.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, 50,
Come on.
50 this year and 50 next, right?
Yeah, 50 this year, 50 next year.
There we got our community.
And then what I would do is I would fund the sound system, because it's not going to be very expensive at all, and then I would say put everything else into the theater.
For this, yeah, for the next fiscal.
For this year and next year. I mean, that way we're taking care of the number 2 item on the list, which is a no-brainer because it's not expensive, and we all voted pretty much number 1 for the theater, so that's where the lion's share of the money should be going. Any other comments?
And we have no, and the Children's Museum, we have no number at all, so that's number 3, so we'd start going down to, farther out things.
And so what, Court, where was it after this? So I've put all of available here, but what, was there some additional the following year then?
Well, I would be in favor of taking the facade improvements to 50 across the board. I don't know about you guys. And, a lot of them came out in the beginning when it was first offered, so I think the people that were really on board with that and really needed the assistance and were really ready to make a commitment, it seems like the majority of it, the lion's share of them, have kind of come already, and now we're getting the trickle in response. So. Plus,
in the out years, we can raise it back up if we see a situation after we,
And this is one of the things, if all of you recall, and I'm just giving you the information, that we wanted to stop doing the penny ante stuff and do something big that would make a statement, if you will, or actually do something. So I think that putting some money in for the couple of years later for other issues that may be in the community center is really a good idea. Yes, Court.
What's the target funding for that you did I hear target funding for the community center?
600,000
to make up the difference. Is that the redevelopment target I heard, or was it?
No, I don't think we had a target. It was just I identified originally 146,000, but now we've got almost 189,000. So that's now we're talking about quite a bit of money.
Well,
2/3.
You got the money for the seats right away. It's just a question of how you structure it for the rest of the phase. Yeah.
And
that's a total of 359,000.
Right.
So they're close to their goal. And then they can just figure out, or you're the supervisor, you can figure out how to get the rest. Maybe, this has been so neglected for so long that maybe some of that excess monies that you have can go to this, and this can become a reality in 2019.
And seat plaques as well. You can sell the little sponsored by seat plaques you see in theaters all over the place,
We did it with the benches. Mm-hmm. And I would, Lego, put there it is, never mind. Why can't we do fiscal year 2019 for the portable sound system? I just put it in
It's
this year.
zero at the bottom, so as I'm tallying this up,
No, I'd take the Bob Boldrick Theater down by $5,000. There you go. Yeah, and then you got number 2 taken care of right away.
You just cannot ignore the fact that we have a better and better symphony orchestra in this city because Eleanor and David are now retired and really putting themselves into it. We got all the jazz events they do in August. We got Stephanie Aragati out of WNC doing the musical theater stuff that's wonderful. There's just a lot of other things that could come in here too.
And that tells me also the portable sound system is wonderful because Jazz Beyond basically takes place down there. So I'm sure that they would love to have that portable sound system and take it elsewhere as well. And that too would be owned by the city of Carson City. So, I mean, everything I know has to be owned by the city. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we're done for 2019, don't you?
Any other comments?
so is there anything else that would recommend for funding, or at this point, would you stop there and see how
Well,
how come in?
we don't have any budget numbers for anything else. I mean, we don't even have a budget number for the Children's Museum. The arches we know are going to be expensive. I wouldn't allocate anything until I see something in front of me. I mean, we know how much the first 2 things cost.
Oh, and
for the most part.
Just to put numbers up there, by the way, I threw in $50,000 for the Children's Museum playground. I don't have any idea if that's the right number or not. You can see in FY 2020, just going down the list.
Well, the one thing that we are missing that I think is also very important is, although you have it, I'm sorry, is the sound system for 2020, so the Fuji Park.
Is that 100,000 figure, is that just a placeholder or?
The 100,000 is, they estimate 75 to 100,000. It's pretty much a placeholder. That's not bids, but it's from Eric at the community center. I think he looked through a catalog. I think he got a pretty good estimate from good range. So I think it's in that. So that was the higher end estimate for it.
Well, I think that looks good, and we still have a 216,500 at the bottom of 2020 as a residual anyway, so I'm good with that one.
Easy.
Any public comments? Okay, do we need a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve this document as it is, as it is presented on the screen. And that it remain fluid. Thank you very much. That it remain fluid. So these are not numbers like we have in 2018 that cannot be moved around for whatever reason. So however you make that.
Okay, any further discussion? Second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous.
Better save this then. I just hit something. Wait, I just hit something.
Hit the same button.
Yeah, take a picture, quick. Okay. For discussion, Lee, staff reports and updates.
I don't have any additional updates for you tonight, thanks.
I think you gave us enough tonight, right? Future agenda items for the next RAC meeting?
So as I mentioned, I haven't even had a chance to go through it, just got last week, application for facade improvement, so I'll review that. So your regularly scheduled meetings are quarterly, the next one being in May. We reserve this room monthly on the first Monday for just these instances. So assuming that is all complete and we'll be bringing it forward at the beginning of March, we'll might take also that opportunity to give the annual open meeting law presentation from the district attorney's office. And we should have the 7th seat on the citizens committee filled by then. I think that I think that should be on the board's agenda this month.
Does anybody apply?
It is on 2:15.
Yes, 2 people. Yeah, is it the 15th? Yeah, good. Yeah, so we'll have some new members to take the open meeting law training with us here. That's all, that's all I had.
Excellent, thanks, Lee. Any reports from RAC members? Again, I think we did a lot tonight, so I think we did accomplish a lot tonight and perhaps cleared up a few muddy items.
One last thing. Welcome, Mike.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Oh,
Move to adjourn.
I did it. Again? Want me to do it again? Any more public comment? Just to make sure? Okay,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all right. Meeting adjourned at